people need to know these things. We all think that we're the only one second guessing ourselves, wondering and getting this advice from everyone's telling us not to do it. That happens to any successful person. And that's the pivotal moment. If you push through it to find success, or if you retreat and go back to whatever it was you were doing before.
Bam.
Jayson Waller here, True Underdog Podcast, top 3 entrepreneur, motivational, inspirational podcast for Apple. I am super excited to have one of my mentors on. She is a badass. She's already wrote her first book, which was a top seller, and she's got her second book coming out. And listen to this. The book title is Overcome Your Villains. How about that? My girl, Heather Monahan, how you doing?
Oh my gosh, I'm so great. And I want to rename your show True Friend, not True Underdog, because you are, and I want everyone listening to know this about you, because sometimes, Jayson, you know this, we know a lot of personalities on social media, and people aren't always the way that they show up, in front of a camera, of course. And, I am so grateful for your friendship. And I literally, just so everyone knows, I text Jayson in a hot mess the other day, freaking out. I need your help. Totally freaking. I need support. Is there any way you can get me on your show ASAP? And you're like, done. I'll do it tomorrow. And here we are. So I'm renaming the podcast today, True Friend. And thank you.
Oh, I love that. And I'm excited to help you out because I wrote a book, and I wouldn't have wrote a book if you didn't challenge me and guide me and mentor me to write a book. So for those out there, you're going to have to check out our first book, which was Confidence Creator. Heather knows her shit. Like, she is going to help you break the barriers. She's going to help you overcome those things. She's a huge mentor for me, my business, me writing a book, me being a podcaster. So you're also a true friend, Heather. But I want to get it down to the down and dirty. I mean, a lot of people that are listening may have never heard of you, right? They don't know who you are because you came on the show early on in the True Underdog episode, somewhere like episode 30. We're at like 170 now. And I want them to kind of know who you are and what really puts you on the map. Because when I met you, I was in awe. I was like, dude, this is a girl that gets it. She overcomes adversity. She's hungry. She's pro-female. I've got 3 daughters. She stands on her own 2 feet and does things. She's breaking barriers. Why don't you tell the listeners out there exactly, summarize your story of where you used to be and where you're at now?
Started at the bottom. So you and I are so cut from the same cloth. It's crazy. I feel like you're my brother from another mother. Just like you. I mean, I grew up really poor. I never felt great about myself growing up, but I learned from being poor, I don't want to be poor anymore, right? So like you, I just had this intrinsic drive that nothing will stop me. Granted, I've had plenty of pitfalls along the way, but I jumped into sales right out of school and did really well in the radio business at a really young age and ended up with a publicly traded company. I was there 14 years. I was the chief revenue officer. I was named one of the most influential women in radio in fourth quarter 2017. And a couple weeks later, I was fired when the CEO I worked for 14 years became ill. He replaced himself with his daughter, and I was blown away. I mean, I literally thought I had lost everything overnight, and I ended up.
Well, let's talk about that. Right?
Yeah,
I want you to finish
yeah.
it. So when you're on top of the world, you just had some accolades. You're the most influential female in radio, and radio is huge. You get fired, no warning, just you're fired. What is that like? Like, what's that feeling? Because I know a lot of people out there listening are like, I've been fired before. I've been rejected before. I've been left behind before. What is that feeling?
Awful, especially when, and I hope someone can relate to this, I was taking a lot of my self-worth from my paycheck, my title, my team, right? Like all these external factors kind of propped me up. And when I felt like I was wrongfully, fired, that I lost, these things were taken from me, it was devastating. I literally did not know what I was going to do. I thought I had lost everything.
And what did you do? Because this is the best part.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy. And this is so funny because my new book, Overcome Your Villains, is all about this 3-step process to overcome any adversity. And now when I sit here and I'm like intentional and remembering, this is exactly what I did. And so I'm going to share it with you in this moment when I got fired. Just like anyone, I went under a weighted blanket. I cried my eyes out. I drank a bottle of Chardonnay, not a glass. I lost my mind. The train was off the tracks. However, thankfully, the next day when I got up, I knew that I needed to take action. So the first thing was I was thinking, I lost everything, it's over. And I had to break that belief down to the most simplistic fact. And here is what the fact was. I didn't lose everything. I lost a paycheck. I didn't lose my expertise. I didn't lose my network. I didn't lose my personality, my unique value proposition. I didn't lose my business acumen. I lost my paycheck. So once I kind of dialed it down a little bit, like we have to deconstruct the story that we're all telling ourselves, which is usually not a great one, right?
Right.
Next thing I said is, I got to take action. And I decided to post on social media, I've just been fired. If I've ever helped you in any way, I need to hear from you now. And that post went viral and it landed me on the Elvis Duran show. And while I was on the Elvis Duran show, he looked at me halfway through and he said, well, Heather, obviously you're writing a book. And I said, well, obviously, but I wasn't writing a book, like you. And I remember we talked about this a while ago that I never thought I thought you had to be a literary major or super, super smart. I didn't think you could be a salesperson or a business person and write a book. And it turns out you can. You just need someone to believe in you. And that day, Elvis Duran believed in me. I said, that's it. I'm going to take his conviction and belief. I Googled, how do you write a book? And it turns out you have to be disciplined and sit down and write. And I had just been fired. So I figured out, if I'm ever going to do this, the time is now.
And you wrote that book and it exploded. Confidence Creator exploded. I've got the book. It's a fantastic book. I haven't read many books in my life. Yours is one of the few I've read, and my own, and maybe David Meltzer's. But, the ability to see and understand what is really going on is hard for people. When it feels like it's raining and it can't stop raining and the storm's there forever, I always revert back to the story I talk about all the time on the show, the difference between a cow and a buffalo. And a cow runs away from the storm. And a lot of people in your position, they still would look at it, my life is over, I don't have my skill sets, I have nothing, everything's gone. And they're going to run from the problem rather than deal with it. And that storm's going to chase them and it's going to hover over them and give them regret and give them anxiety and all those bad feelings. Where you kind of turned into the buffalo and you ran right through the storm and you dialed back and said, this is the only thing I'm really losing. I'm not losing anything else. I understand that it's a paycheck and there's several companies out there. I can go get a paycheck somewhere else, but you didn't lose the value of who you are and what your goals are and what your initiatives are and how you're going to get to the spot you want to be in. And then writing a book on your own, because you challenged me to write a book. I came on your show. I've never even read a book. I can't even spell entrepreneur, right? I'm like, I don't know how to spell.
That is a tough one. That's a tough one to spell.
Well, look, I'm illiterate. I text stuff and it's like, oh, my bad. I'm bad. I can't spell nothing. But I wrote a book, and I wrote a book because you inspired me to write a book. You were like, you can write a book. And I'm like, I was told before I should. I was like, no way. But you made me feel better about it. Your story made me encouraged that, you know what? She went through the worst of times, lost her job. You were going through a divorce, like all this, right? You were a single mom. It was storms like crazy. And you became a buffalo and ran right through that shit and did that. You wrote the book. That's where I was like, I can do it because I'm kind of on top of the world right now. I don't have any problems. What better time than to write a book right now? If she's doing it with the world against her and she's like, I'm going to take time to write a book, don't know what's going to happen, I can surely do it while things are going great. And so that's what I did. And it's inspiring.
Well, what's funny is that, of course, I knew you could do it because I had done it, right? And I saw all of your success and I knew you had so much to teach and share with others. So it's like anything. Once you've done something, you know how possible it is for others or possible for you to do again. And at the same time, it's so interesting. Here I am a couple of years later. I can look back and connect the dots and see how I ended up here. But the hard part is in that moment. Like you said, right when the storm is hitting you, you can't connect the dots. You only can do that when you look back. You can't do it looking forward. So it really is, that's the critical moment, is when everything is going bad. Break down that belief, break down that story you're telling yourself, see what is that simple fact, if there is any, because oftentimes there's no fact to it. Like you saying, I've been told I can't write a book. Really? Who told you that? And who were they to, anoint you an author or not? That's not true. And once you distill things and break it down to whatever fact is there, then you can start taking action and move it forward.
You're right. You've been on some cool shows. I mean, you were on Gary Vee's show. I'm still waiting for an invite there. I passed him on the podcast thing one time and I copied him and he didn't say nothing, but you got to go on Gary Vee's show. What's really cool is you took a chance to invite him on your show. Why don't you explain how that went down?
Oh yeah. So All right, this is a good one, especially for anyone in sales. I had been DMing Gary for years back when I was in corporate America, just because I thought he was so cool. I'm like, there's got to be something we can work on together. I don't know what, but I just want to open up a conversation. And I'm always networking, reaching out, totally encourage everyone to do the same. If you don't hear back, you're in no different situation than you were yesterday, nothing lost. So, a couple times he'd responded, but nothing big. So finally I took out a Google alert on his name. And anytime you have a target or someone you love that you're a fan of, take out a Google alert on their name, because you're going to get updates on them. And I got an update one day that he had launched a wine company with his partner. So I thought, I bet the partner's easier to get to than Gary. I tracked his partner down on LinkedIn. I sent a DM, and always lead with adding value. So I said, hey, just wanted to let you know, I was in the wine business for years. I was, number one brand manager for blah, 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 blah. Showing that I had credibility in his space. I said, if you want me to share with you some of the things that worked really well in the wine business and some of the things that I hope you will avoid so you don't have the pitfalls I had, I'd love to give that to you. And so he said, oh my gosh, call me right now. We jumped on a call. I spoke to him for an hour. We hit it off. And at the end of the call, he said, I owe you big. He said, what can I ever do to repay you? And I said, it's so funny you asked that. I would love it if you would ask your partner if he could be a guest on my show. And he said, oh my gosh, you're hysterical. Okay, I'll do it. He does it. Gary agrees. I go to New York. I'm filming with Gary. And right before I go on, I always create relationships with the people around your main person, because you need to be able to get back in. And so I'm talking to his assistant, his lead assistant, who's the coolest guy. And I said, dude, how do I get me on his show? Right? I'm asking his right hand. He says, Heather, get him to commit to it on camera, and that will happen. He's like, ask him on your show right now. And I thought, holy cow, this is really ballsy. Now, and this was making me nervous now going in, because I didn't have a lot of time. I wasn't prepped, right? I'm like, how am I going to position it? How am I going to add value? How am I going to close them? So I just got into the questions, and all of a sudden I realized the interview is ending, right? Because this guy is like scheduled back to back. And I thought, oh, shoot. And I threw it out on the table. I'm like, well, Gary, I so appreciate your time and I appreciate you being here. Do you think that your audience would ever get value hearing from a single mom how she bounced back from getting fired? He said, yeah, heck yeah, they would. I said, well, then would you bring me on your show? He said, I would absolutely do that. And we've got the whole thing recorded, right? So, he agrees to it. I leave. And of course, it was like months trying to get back on there because he's so busy. And I sent a clip of him saying, yes, Heather, you can be on, to his assistant. I'm like, dude, you had me do this. Get me back on. And he booked me on there and put me on the show.
And that was huge, right?
Oh my gosh, that was game changing. And then Gary was posting and reposting clips from it. And yeah, it's, you just got to go bigger and take just go for it. If you don't get it, I didn't hear back from that guy for 3 years on DMs. Just don't give up.
Yeah, you got to bet on yourself too. You got to take the chances. You can't make the shot if you don't take the shot, right? The unicorn comes by only a few times, right, Heather? I mean, you got to jump on that unicorn. You can't watch it go by. You had an opportunity there and you seized it. So, you have a podcast as well.
Yeah. So Creating Confidence podcast, I've had it for 2 years. As I mentioned, Jayson was an amazing guest. And that's where we came to the agreement that you were going to write a book, which was so crazy. I've never had that happen.
Was that set up like the Gary Vee thing? Because you got that recorded. Like, I'm challenging you to write a book. I'm like, oh boy. You're like, and it's recorded. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
No, I did not have a strategy in mind before we went on air, but it was so obvious. One of the ways I hold myself accountable is if I want to do something like I wanted to write a second book, I'll post on social media, hey guys, I'm writing my second book, even though I hadn't started, because it's like reverse engineering accountability. If I tell people I'm doing it, they're going to start messaging me. Where are you at with it? How's it going? They're going to hold me accountable. And when I need that push, and I just knew you needed a little push.
I did need a push because I was too nervous. I was intimidated. I mean, there's only, I feel like people are great at a few things and good at a few things and then not so good at other things. And I felt like I know nothing about that. I was intimidated. Like, I don't know how to do that. But you gave me that confidence, like I can do it. And now I've done it. I'm like, this is great. Like it's exploding. So I get all excited. I'm like, wow, this is, I can actually do that. I'm pretty good at it. That's fantastic. I would have never done that. And I think listeners out there, there might be something they're interested in doing and they're just scared. You've got to take a chance. The worst failure is regret of never trying. It's okay to not get the results you want. You learn from it. But if you don't take chances, you'll never get the rewards. And I hear that too many times.
Well, it's important for people to know too. Here I was encouraging you to go do it. You ended up being a Wall Street Journal bestseller, Jayson. My book was not a Wall Street. So it's like, it's just kind of cool to see, I never even knew what was going to be possible for you. Not only did you not know it, I didn't either. I knew you could do it, but holy, like you went another level, but you're not going to find that out until you take those steps and take the chance.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm super excited. But your next book, okay, Overcome Your Villains. Talk about the steps in that. Give us some quotes or some stuff about the book, because it comes out literally in a week.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So it's broken into 3 sections. And I truly believe 2 years ago, one of my mentors came to me and he said, the one thing I noticed that you're not doing is you're not sharing a simplistic process that everyone can duplicate that can create success like you have, Heather. And I said, okay, well, I don't know what that is. And he said, sit and think about it. And it took me, I'll say about a year. I mean, I sat with a whiteboard and thought like, okay, how did I get these jobs when I was younger? How did I, achieve the success? How did I bounce back from termination? How did I bounce back from divorce? How did I bounce, all these different scenarios in my life. And I looked at what were the commonalities, that I put into play. And finally, I figured it out. And it came down to each time I was in these challenging moments, I distilled the belief at first, like anyone, I start with, my life is over. Things are horrible. It's a pandemic. I'm going to be fat and die in my apartment. Whatever it is, like you got to break that down to absolute fact. What fact is there? And 90% of the time there's zero. There's no fact to it. Once you have lowered that situation, you kind of pulled the drain out and said, okay, let's take some pressure off here. Okay, this isn't near as bad as we thought it was going to be. And the most important thing, take action immediately. It doesn't matter if you're asking for help. It doesn't matter, if you're putting a post up on social media, sharing with people what you're doing, or you're hiring a mentor or a teacher. Take some action step to move you forward, even if it's small, because that's going to start building momentum for you. And that third part is knowledge. And this has been a really critical, hard one for me. I used to take knowledge from anyone who wanted to give it, right? So my mother said, don't write this book with my first book. She thought I shouldn't, don't do that. That's not something you should do. I almost didn't publish my book because my mom told me I shouldn't do it. And I made a good decision in that moment. I hung up with my mother. I was upset, right? Like any kid would be. And I said, you know what? I'm going to call my editor. I called him because he had written 19 books. And I called him and I said, I don't think I can move forward. And he said, well, why? And I said, my mom told me not to. And he said, let me ask you a question. How many books has your mother written? And I said, well, none. He said, how many books have I written? And I said, 19. He said, so who do you think you to defer to? Who's the right person to give you advice about books? I said, well, you. He said, okay, let me explain to you what you need to do next. He said, connect with your why. Why did you write this book to begin with? And I said, because I want others to have a blueprint for confidence creation in any situation, because I didn't have it growing up. I know what it is now, and I want to give it to others. He said, did this conversation with your mother change that? No. I said, didn't change that. He said, then why are we even having this discussion? Publish the book. And it was that simple. So it reminded me that the knowledge that we access can drastically change our next action step or how we move forward. So we need to be intentional about it. We need to be thoughtful about it. If you don't like following Sally Joe on social media, because when you walk away from her post, you feel bad about yourself, unfollow that lady, right? Like, stop surrounding yourself with knowledge that doesn't support, challenge, and grow you.
Yeah, that's so well said. You're right. People are just scared to take action. They just sit around and fester in the mud and they don't do anything. And you've got to take action. I love that you called him and he called your hand on that. That's fantastic because he told you what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear.
Yes, that's well said.
And a lot of people, that's what they look for. They're like, this. Sometimes people just kiss your ass and they do this. And, what I love most about certain people in my life, even my wife, my best friend, like certain people will call my hand on shit. And that's what I need to hear. It's not what I want to hear. You get used to want to hear all the good things, but you need to hear the bad things, or you need to hear what the real opportunity is. Because my parents told me when I first opened a business, that'll never work. My wife's family said, you guys will never make money. Why are you going to get into that business? All my friends and people were like, don't get into solar. That's a loss leader. You're going to lose everything. Like people that don't know, it's either because they're scared to do it, so they try to give you that advice. They don't know enough about it, so they're uncomfortable, so they give you bad advice. or they hate on you. They don't want you to be successful and do something they can't do. So they give you bad advice. So reaching out to your editor is so key. You got to surround yourself with people that understand what it is you're trying to accomplish to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. I think that's great.
Thank God you did not listen to those people. Can you imagine? It's just unbelievable. And people need to know these things. They need to know that we all think that we're the only one dealing, second guessing ourselves, wondering and getting this advice from everyone's telling us not to do it. That happens to any successful person. And that's the pivotal moment. If you push through it to find success, or if you retreat and go back to whatever it was you were doing before.
That's right. And if you don't like what you're doing now, you got to change it. You don't want to follow Sally anymore. Cut her off, right? Cut her off.
Unfollow.
All right. So overcome your villains. They can find it where?
Everywhere. This is what's so crazy. And you and I have talked about this a lot. My first book I self-published, so it was primarily Amazon. But now my book is available in China, Japan. I mean, it's Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, anywhere that you get books, you are going to find it. And what's super cool is, and this is another thing I didn't know, I did the Audible version of my first book, right? Super nervous when I did it because I had never done one before. Then I had a podcast for 2 years. I signed with HarperCollins Leadership and I said, hey guys, when do I get to start recording the Audible version? They said, well, you have to try out. I said, I have to try out to be Heather Monahan. They said, yeah, you have to audition and we have some other voices that we really like and we'll put you up against them. I said, okay, I'm trying out to be me. I just want to get clarity on this. They said, yes, Heather, this is how it works. So I got super nervous and I text my friend who had done an Audible version. She had won the part of herself. And I said, hey, give me a piece of advice. What do I do? I'm freaking out. They didn't give me any direction and I want to get the part of Heather Monahan. And she said, here it is. Ready? Sit down. I'm like, okay, what is it? She said, just be you. And it was the best advice, right? And I had forgotten, like, of course I need to show up as me. So I hung up with her. I flipped the camera on. I just read a chapter. I sent it in. And immediately I heard back, you got it, Heather. Then I went back to them and I said, I had loved the David Goggins book, You Can't Hurt Me. In the Audible version, Jayson, you have to listen. It's super powerful. At the end of every chapter, he does not voice his book. Somebody else voices it. And then at the end, he comes on and just riffs, like behind the scenes. This is what was really going on. Like it's like added content, sort of behind the scenes throughout the whole book. So I said to them, well, now that I got the part of Heather Monahan, are you good with me taking some creative liberty to the book? And they said, absolutely. So I got to do that David Goggins riff at the end of every book. And I don't even remember now what it was I said. So I'm so excited for it to be live so I can go listen to it.
Oh, that's exciting. I am going to listen to it as well. Super excited. I love David Goggins. I do have to get his book. I watch his stuff all the time, but he is an inspiration. I love that he's real and raw, and I can appreciate that. Everyone needs to follow Heather on Instagram. It's Heather Monahan. You need to follow her on LinkedIn. We'll have all the links below. You need to go get both books, but really get this new book because it is going to be the bomb. She's got that extra content for you. And Heather, what advice would you give anybody right now going into the end of the year to setting goals for 2022?
Oh my gosh, just go bigger. Just write them down. So many people write down their grocery list every day because they don't want to forget Sally Joe's candy corn, but you don't write down that you want to earn $700,000 in the next calendar year. The reason why you write things down is because you're 90% more likely to deliver on them if you do. Write them down, visualize them daily. I keep my goals right next to me at my desk every single day. I'm looking at them. The more you focus on something, the more energy will go to it, the more apt you are to achieve it. Go bigger, write it down, and make it happen.
Bam! There you have Heather Monahan. Check out the book, Overcome Your Villains. And look, I think you got a thing for Sally Joe. So poor Sally Joe, we want to quit following her on Instagram. She doesn't write down her damn goals, only the grocery list. So it's fine, Sally Joe. We apologize. We're just having fun with you, Sally Joe. But thank you. And that's a wrap here on True Underdog. Bam! And that concludes another episode here on True Underdog. If you're interested in hearing more, make sure you subscribe at iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the YouTube channel. You can always visit TrueUnderdog.com, subscribe to all of them. Make sure you check out our newest episodes coming out on Mondays and Thursdays. True Underdog, baby. Bam!